actually a really good, that's a really good tip. I think that, and it's something that I tell my clients, but something that you just repeated and might be worth reiterating is put yourself in the officer's position, right? They don't know you. They may know nothing about this business if they've only had a couple of minutes to review it, or if they're reading off someone else's notes. Be prepared to talk about your business in a way that can be approved or approvable and make sense to them. Because, and you may get this as well, but I get a lot of people that ask me, well, is it, I'll say, okay, well, you need a substantial amount. Okay, well, what if I only invest this amount? Well, what if I only do this? And I'm like, honestly, there's very little written about the exact amount, the exact way that it must be done, or this or that. But you need to show someone who doesn't know you at all, but may not know anything about your business in 5 minutes or less why it meets all the requirements. So do you want to kind of do it on like the base level? This could work if you consular officer are in a great mood and it all works, or do you want to be on the, oh, this is clear, let's just approve it and move on, I got tons of other people to get through today, right?
Right, exactly. The other thing that kind of, I don't want to say irritates officers, but the other thing that is difficult for officers to approve is if the applicant is kind of hedging their bets, right? So I run into that in my own practice, like, oh, well, we'll invest this if we get the E2 visa approved, right? But that's just, unfortunately, that's not how the process works, right? Like if the information is there.
Anna. Yes, yes. Because what I tell people, but tell me from a consular officer's perspective, but what I tell people is this is a risk-based visa. I mean, it's in the regs, right? If a risk-based visa, the more you have at risk, the higher your odds of approval. That's what I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Yeah, absolutely. If the risk isn't there, the officer's not, that's one of those boxes they have to tick. And if it's not there, I see it, all the time, that's definitely a reason for refusal, because they've got to be able to tick that box.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. And I love that. The one thing you said that I really love is that the officers have to justify their approval. So make it easy for them. Make it easy to say yes. And when somebody, because it sounds like what you're telling me is you're kind of randomly selected. Be like, oh, you approved, 20 people today. Let's take 3 of them and kind of take a look at it. Mm-hmm. That it's like, it all makes sense, right? That it's easy for that consular officer supervisor to go, oh, yeah, of course, I get it. Got it. No problem. Good. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's for consistency purposes, right? They want to make sure the officer isn't, having 100% refusals, or having, the other way around, having 100% approvals, right? But still, yeah, I mean, you as the applicant, if you want to be on that approval side, so you're going to have to be able to give the officer the information to justify that decision.
Perfect. I love that. Love it, because it's I always say an educated person's standard, right? It's not a clear and convincing, it's not a legal standard like that. It's like, does this make sense? I don't know. You tell me. I'm going to look at it for 5 minutes. Does this make sense to me? Or does it seem like, wait, what? What is this? Who are these people? What's happening here? I don't understand that. To me, questions are always bad. Like, I just want them to be able to look at it in a second and go, oh, I get it. All right, well, we'll ask a couple of kind of, softballs here and move on.
Exactly. The more the officer understands what's going on, the better your chances are of an approval. I always say you want to make it easy for the officer, right? So if they've got to ask, just basic questions to understand even what's going on, that's a bad sign. You want to make it very, tied up in a nice package with a beautiful bow for the officer to be like, okay, I get it. This is what they're doing, and this is how they're going to be successful. And it sounds to me like they've got 10 years of experience doing this, or they're a serial entrepreneur. Why wouldn't they be successful? Why wouldn't I give them a 5-year visa? Like that's what you want the officer to come out of, like, again, maybe not looking at the materials, because they may not have looked at the materials. And that's why the interview is so important. That's what you want them to kind of come out of it with after they talk to you, and again, these interviews are short, right? So, as you said, you only have, maybe 5 minutes to make your entire case, but officers are also trained a lot. There's a lot of emphasis in the 6 weeks training that they get before they go to post, about like mannerisms and professionalism. And so, and dress code, like all of that, like they're trained to look at the person in front of them and see, is this person capable of running a multi-million-dollar business or, a successful business? Like, so all of that plays a role in the officer's decision, unfortunately, right? I mean, it's all about how you conduct yourself, not just your verbal responses, but mannerisms, eye contact, all of that is taken into consideration. So you really do have to be prepared and present yourself really well in that small period of time, which, is kind of an art, but that's the process.
Yes. I love that you use that word art, because I feel the same way about putting the applications together. There's just like, you just kind of get a feeling or a vibe about like, we should really emphasize this and maybe not point this out as much, that type of thing. And it sounds like as a consular officer, you have kind of a similar thing, right? So you're looking for, interesting that you mentioned the mannerisms. So again, I tell my clients, just pretend like it's a job interview that you're on the happy side of, right? They want to just ensure things. I mean, what would you say about the mannerisms? What types of things? You said dress, right? Like tank tops and cutoffs. We're not looking for that. At the same time, you don't need a tux with tails. What kind of things would you tell them about just dress, mannerisms, that type of stuff? Like where they can just walk up and it's already kind of like, oh, okay, this person looks accurate for what they're kind of trying to do, or I get a good feeling about this person. What are some things that the consular officer is looking for, and some things that the client can do to kind of just put themselves on a good path just with the mannerisms and look?
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to that whole story has to make sense, right? So, if the application package says that you've got, 20 years of business experience, I'm going to, expect to see someone that looks professional and looks like a business executive in front of me, right? I mean, so business casual, it doesn't have to be a full 5-piece suit, but it should be, yes, it should appear that you are who you say you are in the application materials, right? So, I know I had a colleague one time who had a tattoo artist who was coming to set up a tattoo parlor. And he said, he wears t-shirts with his, tattoos showing. And I mean, that's his business dress, right? Like it doesn't make sense to send him to the interview in a suit. Like the officer's just not going to believe that. Right. And so that's it. And I agree with that assessment, right? Like the officer is looking to, does it make sense for the, profession and position that you're going to be holding in the United States? So that's kind of the general rule of thumb. You need to appear to look like who you say you are. The vice versa is true too, right? Like if you show up in a t-shirt and jeans and you're supposed to have 25 years of business experience, I'm going to be less inclined to believe that, that it's going to be harder for you to make the case that's really who you are, if you're not appearing and your mannerisms and your English skills and all of that plays a role in that as well, right? If you've got, I know some officers who were really picky about that, even if they spoke the native language, they would do an E2 interview in English, because they said if you're going to be a business person, running your business in the US, you've got to be able to have a certain level of operational English. And so then they would force the client to do the interview in English. So all of that plays a part in the decision.
Right. I think that's interesting, because I get that question, not that often, because most of my clients do speak English. On occasion, I will get some clients that speak Spanish only. They usually understand English, but are a little nervous, kind of a little scared to speak English. As a solo English speaker, I do understand that. I took a few years of French, and I would never utter a word to someone who actually spoke French, because I know how bad my French is. But so I get that question a lot, right? Do I have to speak English with this? And the answer is, it's not a requirement, but does it make sense, right? Because I feel like if you're moving to Miami and you speak Spanish, you may have a decent shot. I had a client from the Ukraine who was moving to Orange County, and he spoke Ukrainian and Russian. So really in that business plan, we emphasized, hey, he had all of his employees speak Russian and English, and he's not going to be doing client interaction. And it's actually a larger Russian population, right, at that time, and kind of really emphasize that in the business plan. But I do tell people, especially if it's not Spanish, I think you have a shot if it's Spanish, but if it's not Spanish, you really need to speak English, right?
Yeah, the other side of that is, the officer, even if they speak your language, typically, depending on the difficulty of the language, if it's a Romance language, they get 6 weeks of training or 12 weeks of training before they go to post, right? So, their level of fluency to understand what your responses are and to understand what's going on is going to be limited in most cases. And you don't want the officer to not understand what's going on, right? So usually if you've got a fairly decent level of English, it's an advantage to you to do the interview in English, because if the officer understands what's going on, that again, going back to, making it easy for the officer, the easier
for them.
for the officer, the better chance you are to get approved. So there's two reasons to do it.
Yeah. And I think the reality is too that, E2 visas do take some time to put together. I get people, and I'm sure you get this too. Oh, can we apply in 2 weeks? No, we're not going to be ready for that. This is you're setting up a business on a new continent. This is not something that takes 2 weeks. That's a hair appointment, right? This is a lot more than that. But the good news is you have time to work on your English. You have time. Take these few months while we're gathering everything, while you're getting things together, and get a little bit better at English, at least more comfortable, right? Even if you feel like you're not perfect, you don't need to be perfect, but just get more comfortable, I think. And I tell people that as well, because I do get people that do speak English, but they're a little choppy and it's not exact. Like, this is a perfect time for you. This, take a few online classes, whatever. You've got a couple of months here that I think you can really improve. So that's interesting.